and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday Morning, where we watch the Sunday morning news show so that you do not have to. I'm Katie Halper.
I'm Aaron Maté. Good Monday morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Great to start the week with you and some of the worst people on corporate TV. Our website, as always, is usefulidiotspodcast.com. Go there to support the show and get bonus content. I got to share something, Katie, and I'm kind of in a bad mood today. It's content related. Today is the last episode of another podcast that's like really important to the genre. Like I've listened to it almost from the start, and it's ending today. It's Mark Maron's podcast, WTF.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's the last, and I love that show.
Wow.
And it's all about like comedy and raw honesty, and Mark Maron is very vulnerable and shares a lot. And like the show's helped a lot of people deal with their own struggles, and it's also really funny. It speaks to the most brilliant comedians in the world. Anyway, you know who his last guest was? Who he's ending his show with? Barack Obama.
I was going to guess that, actually.
I was. Lamest. It's like, can you get any lamer with your choices? Like, and what's the irony is, recently, Mark Maron did a really funny bit making fun of Theo Von for like, promoting Donald Trump and like sucking up to Donald Trump. Like, and there's a really funny bit that he does about it. So it's like, he makes fun of Theo Von for sucking up to Trump, and then he ends his podcast by sucking up to like the most disingenuous, certainly blood-soaked guest in the whole run of the show.
True. It bothers me. It makes me. I thought you were just going to be upset that he didn't have us on.
I'm certainly not. I certainly can't challenge that decision. No, I'm not upset about that at all. No.
See, Aaron, this is why we didn't get on, because you don't manifest it.
I wouldn't want to. I would have nothing to say on that show. It's a show about comedy, and like I'm not a comedian, so I wouldn't. But it's just like like on top of Barack Obama's record, also he's just so like, what does he have to? He's so disingenuous and so milquetoast. Like, does he ever have a moment, even minimal honesty? Is anything he says honest? I just find him so, everything is like, everything is calculated and qualified and just restrained because he's just selling a brand, a political brand.
Like he would never, ever say anything that's like at all interesting and disclosing about himself, right?
Yes, which is the whole point of Mark Maron's whole thing, which is to be like honest and raw and genuine and all those things. So
I just stopped. Aaron, it's funny because I thought you were gonna say you were in a bad mood, and someone in the comments was very upset you're in a bad mood. They were like, Aaron Maté in a bad mood? No.
Oh, well, hey.
Exclamation.
I have news for them. It happens a lot.
I couldn't tell if that's what their point was or if they were actually upset.
I see. I think they're
But I thought you were upset because a little backstage, a little behind the scenes stuff. But this is the first day in history that Meet the Press hasn't posted their recap, their full episode online.
I'm not upset about that. No, we weathered that storm. But anyway, so that's what I'm sharing. That's how I'm being vulnerable this morning.
No, I like this vulnerability. I mean, what I'll say to Mark Maron is WTF.
Amen. WTF. Yeah. It just blows my mind. Your whole show is about like being genuine, raw, insightful, going against the grain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you pick the guy who's like, to me, the exact antithesis of that. And like, he talks about, one of the things Obama talks about in this episode is he's like, our society is too materialistic and it's all about like accumulating wealth and blah, blah, blah. It's like, dude, like which of your multi-gazillion dollar homes are you saying this from?
Yeah, exactly. Well, who would you want? I mean, obviously we know, I think that it should have been us on the last show, but besides us, who do you think should have been the final guest?
Literally any other of the thousands of guests in that run, or just Mark Maron himself, who I think has a lot to say, and I really like. But it's funny how that works with celebrity, and especially that to be charitable. Donald Trump scares a lot of people, so you're looking for someone to be a voice of clarity. I just don't think Barack Obama is it. I think Barack Obama actually helped give us people like Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that wasn't part of the interview. How he enabled Trump.
No, certainly not. No. All right. Well, we're not enabling anybody here. We're calling everybody out, whether it's comedian podcasters or corporate politicians.
And guys, you got to give that a like, because not only do we, I mean, we always ask you for a like, but this is Aaron being vulnerable at like first thing in the morning. I mean, give this a like. If that doesn't deserve a like, I don't know what does. So I say WTF to all the people watching who haven't already given this a like.
Yes, I'm just, again, I've just this last point. I've invested so much time in this podcast. So can you imagine listening to a show for like 16 years, whatever it was, and then the last guest is the most disappointing part. It stinks. It stinks. But I guess
where were you when you found this out? Oh, sorry.
Oh well. Just the point is, I guess the point of being a podcast consumer, and this applies to Fans of Useful Idiots. I guess like you just can't get too attached to your content. I think that's the lesson here.
Yeah,
you just can't get too attached to
it. Right. Unless it's Useful Idiots, because we are here to provide.
All right. Well,
on Obama.
Well, very fittingly, let's get to the weekly recap from Meet the Depressed.
Press with Kristen Welker.
Good Sunday morning. As President Donald Trump prepares to embark on an historic trip to the Middle East to tout the deal between Israel and Hamas to free the hostages and end the fighting in Gaza, a battle brews at home. Mr. Trump testing the limits of his presidential authority, with another Democrat on his enemies list now under indictment. A judge blocking his orders to deploy National Guard troops in Chicago, and unprecedented mass layoffs targeting federal workers during the government shutdown. The president promising the firings would be, quote, Democrat-oriented.
It'll be Democrat-oriented because we figure, they started this thing, so they should be Democrat-oriented. It'll be a lot, and we'll announce the numbers over the next couple of days, but it'll be a lot of people. All because
I like that, Democrat-oriented. I like that because it gives him some flexibility, which I really like. I like that overall turn of phrase. And also, I got to point out, no surprises there, but Welker, of course, mentions the hostages. Who is she referring to? Is she referring to any of the Palestinian hostages? No. And note that they always call them prisoners, never hostages.
Yeah, even though those so-called prisoners include children. That's who Israel kidnaps, including in Gaza since October 7th. They just nab people, kidnap them, and take them hostage. But when Trump says Democrat-oriented, what does he mean? Like people like who provide healthcare services, which he's trying to cut, or people who believe in climate change or scientists? But the naked partisanship it's refreshing. The fact that the president openly saying he's targeting jobs that he think speak to the base of his opposition. You can't get more partisan and corrupt than that.
It's true. Yeah, I gotta say, every now and then it is refreshing. Like what other president would ever said that part out loud about the other whichever party that they were opposing? Republican oriented, Democrat oriented.
Yep. Yeah. Do we have more of this recap?
I think that's it, right? I think that's it. Right, Wilson?
Yep, that's the end. Short one.
Okay. All right.
That's sweet, yeah.
All right. Well, the big news of the weekend, of course, is the commencement of the so-called ceasefire deal in Gaza, which really just means right now, hopefully an end to the genocide. And you were seeing, as we're broadcasting, Palestinian prisoners or Palestinian hostages, some of them are being released by Israel, and some of the Israeli captives are going to be released very, very, very soon. And Trump is actually in Israel. He spoke to the Israeli parliament today, bragging about this deal, which of course could have happened under Biden, and it could have happened earlier on under Trump. But both Biden and Trump prolonged the genocide. But listen, the end of the genocide, if this is what it is something to welcome, no matter how cruel other parts of the deal are. And here is Vice President J.D. Vance touting it.
Well, it is good to have you on this monumental Sunday, Mr. Vice President. Let's start right there with the peace agreement in the Middle East. President Trump said this week, quote, "We have ended the war in Gaza." Mr. Vice President, do you see this moment as an end?
Calling it a peace agreement, even calling it a ceasefire, as we do, is misleading, because again, it's not a war. Right. And it's not in terms of a peace, no, there's no peace here, because none of the underlying issues are being addressed. This is a hostage exchange deal. That's what this is.
Yeah.
That's
Which again, ironically, I mean, this is what Hamas wanted on October 7th. Just a reminder, Israel could have done this on October 7th, October 8th, a couple days later, whatever. I guess it takes a little bit of time I've never exchanged hostages, but this is what they wanted. This is why they did this. And Israel inflicted this entire genocide just so they could not do that.
Yes. And it's a really important point to stress because, captives, hostages in the Palestinian national consciousness are really important. These are the people kidnapped by the occupation army. And in many cases, I mean, you have just completely innocent people, children just taken a kidnap. But you also have a lot of political prisoners, people who are fighting for the liberation of their people. So for a resistance movement, it's important to show that you're there for them. And so the goal, a major goal of October 7th, was to take Israeli captives and exchange them for Palestinian captives. That's how, for example, Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, how he was freed in a previous prisoner exchange. One Israeli soldier, Gilad Shalit, led to the release of hundreds of Palestinians, including Sinwar. So yeah, that was a major aim here. And yes, Israel could have done that, but instead, Israel chose not only to kill its own people on October 7th with the Hannibal Directive, but then launch a genocide because Israel, as Norman Finkelstein explained to us recently on one of our shows, saw a huge opportunity here to solve the Gaza problem, which is basically they don't want the people of Gaza there. So they took the opportunity to destroy Gaza, and Joe Biden and then Trump enabled Netanyahu every step of the way until now.
Yeah. So just remember that when everyone's like, oh, Hamas could have ended this, they could have released the hostages. Well, yeah, they could have. And they wanted to, and they offered to.
And they offered actually to release all civilian hostages from day one in exchange for only Israel not attacking Gaza. That was their only demand. The civilians were actually not even used as leverage for a civilian hostage exchange. Like Hamas said, didn't even ask for Palestinian civilians to be freed. All they said to Israel was, if you do not invade Gaza, we will release all the civilians we've taken. But Israel said no, because again, they wanted the opportunity to destroy Gaza.
Yeah. And by the way, speaking about hostages, as you said, Aaron, a lot of them are children. They do something called administrative detention, which is when they don't even need to charge them. And according to the American Jewish Committee, they had this report on who the hostages are who are being released. And this is insane. So 1,700 Gazans detained after but not involved in the Hamas-led October 7th attack will be freed, either returning to the Strip or exiled abroad. So just a sense of how many people are hostages who have nothing to do with October 7th.
Yeah. And we have to stress this. One of the people Hamas wanted freed, and this speaks to your point about how this could have been negotiated from day one, was not even a member of Hamas. It was Marwan Barghouti, who is known as Palestine's Mandela. He's Palestine's most popular political leader. He's been in prison for more than 2 decades. We recently interviewed his son, Arab Barghouti, and Hamas wanted him freed precisely because Hamas was trying to free someone who could unite the Palestinian people, which speaks to the specific motive here of October 7th, which of course gets completely buried in all the manufacturing consent for genocide.
Exactly. And that's why they have to say they raped a bunch of people, they beheaded a bunch of people, because if they present them as rational actors, then it becomes very clear that what Israel's doing was totally against Israeli the self-interest of Israelis.
Yes. And it also means you have to if someone's has clear rational goals, you have to negotiate with them.
Right.
If you want to have peace and if you want to have your people back. Israel didn't care about that. They took the opportunity to destroy Gaza. And they still, at least as of now, from the last I've seen, they still will not release Marwan Barghouti, precisely because they know he's someone who could unite the Palestinian people and have popular legitimacy, which if you're a military occupier, is your enemy. You don't want someone who could unite the people you're occupying, who could bring them together, who could be effective and tactful. All the things, by the way, that I think Hamas are not. So that's why they're insisting on keeping him behind bars, caged.
Another person, by the way, they are not releasing is Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, who is this amazing doctor who risked his life. His son was killed. He is someone who, by the way, his wife has foreign nationality. He could have easily left Gaza. He chose not to. And he's the one who they have that iconic image of walking through a totally devastated scene, walking towards a tank. And he surrendered himself to a tank. They know full well he didn't commit a single crime. He's lost tens of pounds, I think up 50 pounds. He has a medical condition they're not treating. And their targeting of journalists is something we've covered, and it's despicable. Their targeting of healthcare workers is despicable. And their targeting of Dr. Abu Safia is just unbelievable. It is awful that every doctor around the world should be up in arms demanding his freedom.
There is some hope that he will be freed. Israel initially said that he would not be freed, but in the recent hours, like today, there's been actually some talk that he might be. But you never know. Again, Israel has every incentive to keep him caged because they've tortured him. They tortured another doctor that they kidnapped to death, and they certainly tortured Dr. Abu Safia. So they have every incentive not to release him. But there's been a lot of pressure, and there's now conflicting reports. So he actually might end up being. But the point is, they kidnapped a heroic doctor, subjected him to abuses, torture we can't even imagine for months now. And if he is freed, then somebody else who is just as innocent will then remain caged by Israel because they've kidnapped so many Palestinian hostages.
You know that according to Relief Web, 2 healthcare workers were killed every day on average during Israeli's genocide. 2. And you just mentioned another doctor who was killed, and that was Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh, another extremely brave doctor. He was actually orthopedic surgeon and the head of orthopedics at the Al-Shifa hospital. He was tortured. He was detained for months. He was tortured, and according to a Sky News investigation, and they're not exactly pro-Palestine and anti-Israel, he was killed after being sexually abused and tortured and had blood around his genitals. And it's unthinkable what they're doing. And so RIP to Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh and every person killed in the genocide. But right now I'm just thinking of all the medical workers, and you have to kill medical workers because that's how you help facilitate a genocide.
All right. Well, it's a bad omen if we can't even get through like we're gonna without a lengthy debunking, but that's what happens when you're trying to like accurately cover corporate media coverage of the Gaza genocide. It's just so distorted in favor of the genociders. Anyway, let's get back to JD Vance on Meet the Depressed.
To the war in Gaza?
Well, I do, Kristen. We're going to have to do a lot of work to make sure that it stays ended. But I also have to give your network a little bit of grief, Kristen, because last night I was watching NBC. They were covering this, and they mentioned that during a rally last night in Israel, when Steve Witkoff, our great special envoy, mentioned Bibi Netanyahu, the crowd booed. But the broadcast didn't mention that when Steve Witkoff mentioned President Trump, the crowd actually cheered. And why is that, Kristen? Why did the crowd cheer? Because this moment came from very, very deliberate and consequential diplomacy from the president and the.
How pathetic is that? Chris, I got to give you some grief for not saying something really nice about President Trump. Why didn't you point out that they were cheering for him?
Well, that's his job. That's his job, basically, is to be Donald Trump's personal hype man. Yeah, to I'm sure, was he watching NBC News, or was the staff of flunkies who were there to monitor the media for insufficient praise of the dear leader watching and then handing him his talking points, call out NBC News for not praising the dear leader. I mean, that's pretty much what many people in the White House, I think, are tasked to do.
Right. Okay, let's keep going.
Entire administration. The reason why we are at this moment, Kristen, is because the President of the United States, he gave unusual authorities to people who had never been in diplomacy before. He actually broke the mold. Instead of doing diplomacy the same old way that it had failed for the past 30 or 40 years, he gave Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner a remarkable amount of authority to go and get a peace deal done.
Wow, that's so inspiring. He gave 2 pro-Israel activists unprecedented authority. Steve Witkoff, who got verklempt when the former leader of Mossad applauded him at one of his pro-Israel fundraisers that he went to recently. It's the most like pathetic thing I've ever seen. Like Trump's top Middle East negotiators, like, oh my God, you're not going to believe this.
I know.
My Jewish mother would love this. The former head of Mossad, and it's like he's speaking at a pro-Israel fundraiser, and this is why while he's supposedly negotiating on Trump's behalf for Middle East peace. But by the way, this has nothing to do with Trump delegating authority to like Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. And by the way, why is Jared Kushner even there when Jared Kushner is supposed to be out of government? But it's like he came back just to like do Israel's bidding because that's how committed he is, while also making a lot of money in partnership with Gulf monarchies. But this is not like this has nothing to do with like him delegating authority. This had to do with him simply deciding it was time to end the genocide.
Right.
That's what it was. Israel went too far. They bombed Qatar, and when they were trying to kill Hamas negotiators, that failed. Trump certainly knew about that before. It didn't work, and then Qatar got angry. And unlike the Palestinians of Gaza, who are just stateless, defenseless, they have nothing to offer wealthy people like Trump. Qatar does have something to offer. They gave him a very fancy jet. They're investing money in the U.S. And so finally Trump was like, all right, I think it's time to call this off. And he did. So that's the difference. He called Netanyahu and said it's time to end it. That's what made the difference here. Not like him delegating authority to Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner.
Right. And also in the peace plan, people can look at the track changes document. Trump had put in there, or whoever wrote it for Trump, I mean, obviously he's not crafting this, that they had to that Israel wouldn't bomb Qatar, and Netanyahu, Israel crossed that out. So bombing Qatar is now back on the table.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
He did get Netanyahu to call Qatar and apologize. And he did promise Qatar that won't happen again.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I do think Trump is going to, look after Qatar here. Because, again, Qatar has money.
Right. Yeah, of course.
And he likes that.
Oh, you mean it's not his commitment to human rights and sovereignty?
Well, yeah. I mean, the bottom line of this so-called peace deal is that it just continues the decades-long U.S. policy of denying Palestinians their minimal right to self-determination.
Right.
All it says about that is that it's just so offensive.
Really?
There's a line that just says, we recognize self-determination as the aspiration of the Palestinian people. It's the most meaningless statement. That's like saying, like, to someone who's like starving, like, I recognize your desire for food as your aspiration.
Right.
It's not an aspiration. It's a right. People have the right to self-determination. The Palestinian people have the right to freedom, except in the eyes of the U.S. and Israel. And this so-called peace deal just continues that decades-old rejection of that minimal right.
Yeah, and also, I mean, obviously, like, as we speak, Israel is continuing to raid the West Bank, detain Palestinians after they are attacked by settlers, stand by or work with settlers as they kill Palestinians. So all of that brutality is ongoing and status quo and not being addressed.
All right, more from our vice president.
Worked hard on everybody from the Israelis to the Gulf Arab states to make this happen. This was very hard. This was a long time coming. It required a lot of work. But yes, I believe that we are on the cusp of peace in Gaza for the first time, not just in a couple of years, but really in a very long time, because the President of the United States has done something that no other world leader has been able to do: unite the Israelis with the Gulf Arab states for a common objective, and that is to bring the hostages home, to stop the war, and to build the kind of long-term settlement that we really do believe can lead to a lasting peace.
Yes, well, that lasting peace includes continuing the premise of the entire conflict, if you can call it a conflict, which is just denying Palestinians the right to self-determination. And that's what the so-called peace deal advances. It offers Palestinians absolutely nothing toward their goal of self-determination. All it says is we recognize it as your aspiration, which means absolutely nothing.
Right.
And the one thing it does is the peace deal, it's helpful, along with the fact that if it goes through, this hostage deal, it will end the genocide. And that's good. We don't want to see any more bombing of Gaza after just the unspeakable horror that people have gone through for 2 years. But it also acknowledges that all the Israeli claims about Hamas stealing aid and Israel not blocking aid was a complete lie. Because it says, after this deal goes through, full aid will resume to Gaza. So as Barry Malone said, he's a journalist. He said Israel agrees to allow in the aid it was not blocking. Right.
Wow.
So it's like the whole point is like Israel claiming it wasn't blocking aid, but now they're saying once the deal goes through, Israel will allow in the aid, which is a complete acknowledgement that Israel was blocking the aid. And also it says the UN now can be involved. Well, that dispels the propaganda claim that the UN was compromised by Hamas, and that's why it had to be replaced by the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which now is gone. Because now the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is no more. It's actually packed up its bags and left because it served its propaganda. It served its function, which was to facilitate genocide, not to give people aid.
That was so disgusting. Yeah, and also, Aaron, he really gives away the game, Vance, when he talks about normalization, right? Like he just in the clip we just watched, he said this is uniting Arabs and Israel. He says this will unite the Israelis with the Gulf Arab states. And that's what this is about. He doesn't care about Palestinians. He doesn't even mention Palestinians there, right? This is about the normalization that they wanted to achieve with the Abraham Accords, which was part of what Hamas was acting against. So, yeah. And notice, just not even faking caring about Palestinians in that reference. Okay. So, what do we got next? Oh, this is actually a really interesting, I think, summary, like a report from Face the Nation on the hostages on this peace deal, and it makes a lot of connections to the clip that we just saw. So let's watch this.
U.S. troops going to Israel to help coordinate the Israel-Hamas ceasefire. They've begun arriving ahead of tomorrow's expected hostage release. Our Deborah Pata reports now from East Jerusalem.
More than 400,000 Israelis crammed into Hostage Square last night.
To the hostages themselves, our brothers and sisters, you are coming home.
A hero's welcome for Middle East envoy Steve.
And just to clarify, I'm referring to the Jewish hostages, not the Palestinian ones. Right. You don't have homes anymore because we destroyed them. And we also don't see you as our brothers and sisters. You're our enemy, even though I'm supposed to be the broker for the U.S., not Israel.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You're not brothers and sisters. You're not even human. Yeah.
God, what a fraud.
Kushner and Ivanka behind them.
It's just so embarrassing. So we have Antony Blinken, who was the former Secretary of State, the former top diplomat. He goes to Israel after October 7th. He says, I come here as a Jew, right? Like he's the American diplomat. He's like, I come here as a Jew. And what did he do? He facilitated the Jewish supremacist states genocide. And then who is his replacement? Another Jewish guy who goes to Israel and says, you're my brothers and sisters. And you know what I mean? It's like,
it's so disgusting. Oh. And then they accuse us, Aaron, of like creating anti-Semitism because we speak up. We speak out against this. It's like, are you kidding? Like this, again, Israel is doing such harm, is contributing so much to anti-Semitism, which they claim to care about. But they need anti-Semitism, right, to justify their existence. But what could be worse PR for Jews?
Well, I would argue that man right behind Steve Witkoff is even worse. Jared Kushner. Maybe we'll hear from him in this clip. Let's.
Oh, sadly, we don't.
By the way, every time Jared Kushner speaks, it's like I feel like I'm listening to like a bar mitzvah speech. Like, I'm so happy to be here. Yeah. My parent, and like his parents, what's his wife's name?
Ivanka, right?
Ivanka.
Yeah.
So proud of me for facilitating. Anyway,
he also looks like he's made of wax. Doesn't he? He always looks like he's a wax museum version of himself.
Witkoff flanked by President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner.
To Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
But Witkoff was never going to convince a crowd who have lived through heartbreak, despair, and rage, and accuse Prime Minister Netanyahu of abandoning hostages in Gaza.
Now, remember, a lot of people like to point out, oh, Israel is not Netanyahu. They hate Netanyahu. He doesn't represent the Israeli people. Yeah, they're mad at him because he obviously let hostages die, and in some case, he killed them. Remember we know that there are going to be more cases we don't know about, but there are at least a few cases where, they shot the 3 hostages. They were waving white flags. Then there's a case that you guys at the Gray Zone covered about that soldier who was killed in a tunnel with gas that the IDF released, and they lied about it. And then a coroner's report revealed that they had lied about it. But they're not, just to be clear, they're not critical of Netanyahu over his treatment of the people in Gaza. It's really important to remember that.
Yes, that's right. In fact, most polls, if you look at it, all the polls show that most Israelis support it.
Right.
They support the genocide. They support ethnic cleansing. They don't care about tens of thousands of Palestinians being slaughtered. They're on board with that.
Yeah. All right. Let's watch a little bit more of this.
General Israel Ziv, who rushed to save lives during the October 7 Hamas attack, believes this deal could have been sealed over a year ago.
It's late. The costs were very high, internally and externally. I think that politically, Israel lost their name in the world because we went maybe too far in Gaza. I think the attack in Doha was also, one step too much. But in the end, it brought at least the President Trump to take the right decision to stop the war.
The ceasefire is still holding. 48 hostages, living and dead, will be exchanged for 250 Palestinian prisoners serving life sentences and 1,700 detained since October 2023.
I don't think we saw that imagery on mainstream media before this point. That disgusting imagery of Palestinian men and boys, there were young men in there too, stripped to their underwear in the streets with blindfolded and hands behind their head.
Yeah, and what the reporter's saying there about how the exchange will include people in Gaza kidnapped since October 7th, although she doesn't use the term kidnapping. Right. I mean, that's Israel doing exactly what it accused Hamas of doing, just kidnapping people for leverage. That's all it was.
Exactly.
They just went and just grabbed random people, including children, as hostages. And of course, we never hear about those hostages.
Right. And that's done all the time, not just post October 7th.
Yes.
Yeah.
The deadline is Monday. As Israeli troops withdrew to an agreed upon line within Gaza, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians started the long walk home. Almost the entire population has been displaced.
We enjoy the moment right now, and I'm personally going home despite the fact that it may be a pile of rubbish.
It's just so unbelievable. That's the thing. It's like Trump is congratulating himself for facilitating this when he facilitated Israel's destruction of all of Gaza. In fact, the last part of Gaza that was still livable, Gaza City, was destroyed in recent weeks, with Israel destroying all the high-rise towers. So they talk about going home, but to what? It's mostly a wasteland. And the goal of Israel remains the same, which is to expel people, ethnic cleansing. And are people going to be able to survive in a hellscape that's been completely destroyed, infrastructure destroyed, sewage treatment? Israel, even in the final hours of the genocide, if indeed this is the end of it, bombed a sewage treatment plant. They committed arson. They just destroyed everything they could, because they're a fanatical, out of control state with all the impunity in the world.
Yeah. And as Norman Finkelstein and others have pointed out, but Norman Finkelstein recently during our interview points out, this is not a state project. It's a national project. I mean, it's a state project and a national project. It has major buy-in. And as Haim Bushis Zabner said, who wrote the book, he's been on our show too, and he wrote a book called An Army Like No Other. This is the most democratic genocide in history in terms of the support for it among the society and population. And by the way, when that guy said we went too far in Gaza, just a little bit, I think, just a reminder, obviously the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians killed, at least 455 Palestinians dying as a result of the starvation campaign, and 190,000 buildings and over 330,000 housing units damaged. that's at least 90% of Gaza's buildings and 86% of cropland damaged. And
you know what's like, you know what's so sad about hearing that Israelis say that we went a little bit too far? Yeah, genocide is too far.
Yeah,
that's the name actually of a Norman Finkelstein book about a previous Israeli massacre in Gaza. I think the one in 2008, at the very end of the Bush administration, going into the beginning of the Obama administration. So Norman's book is called "This Time We Went Too Far," and it's like, again, quoting an Israeli. And back then, you know, Norman's ironic title is like refers to a massacre. I forgot the death toll now, but it was about maybe like between 1,000 and 2,000 people, and that was just a horrible massacre by Israel. And
that was published in 2011.
Okay, but it was about the massacre. I'm pretty sure it was about the massacre of 2008, 2009.
Yeah,
the operation then, and so that time, according to Israelis, we went too far, and that was killing a few thousand people. Now they've killed. We don't even know how many people they killed in Gaza. Saying the official death toll is kind of derelict, because there's no way it's only what the official death toll is, because so many people are buried under the rubble, and also in those conditions, how do you count all the dead? It's just impossible.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. And that was the as you just referred to, Aaron, it was the 2008 massacre, which killed 1,400.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Okay, let's hear again from Vice President J.D. Vance.
Through as we can.
A big picture, though, when it comes to American security. You said back in July that you'd seen what you called heartbreaking images of little kids who are clearly starving to death in Gaza, and that, quote, Israel's got to do more to let that aid in. Are you concerned that even if, God willing, this war ends, America's security has been endangered by this perception that America has been okay with Israel and in support of it, despite conduct that clearly you and the president didn't agree with?
Well, two things there, or three things there. First of all, it's not a war. Okay, It's no war. It's a genocide. It's an extermination of a civilian population. Got to stop calling it a war. Second thing is it a perception that the U.S. was okay with what Israel did? It's not a perception. It's a fact. And the U.S. wasn't just okay with it. They facilitated it at every single turn under both Biden and Trump. So, yeah. And of course, the question is, will this hurt America? Okay. I mean, it's a fair question, but the real question is, why did we facilitate a genocide that killed tens of thousands of people? That should be the question every time.
Right. Yep.
Well, look, as the president said, you have to remember the war started because of a brutal terrorist attack on Israeli soil, and we've been laser focused on eliminating the terrorist threat to the Israelis while also ensuring that the innocent people in Gaza get the necessary humanitarian aid. That's a difficult balance to strike. But
well, first of all, there is no balance there because, again, it's not a war, and it didn't begin on October 7th. It began when Israel stole Palestinians' land, kicked them out, stole their homes, and put them under a brutal military occupation, which it refused to end. It refused all diplomatic overtures, including from Hamas, to end. So that's where it starts. And so there's no balance there to strike. The response to October 7th is simply to end the occupation and negotiate a release of hostages. That's what the response to October 7th should have been. And in terms of striking that fake balance, how exactly did you balance anything when the U.S. facilitated Israel's destruction of Gaza at every turn and let it block all the humanitarian aid in the world? So he talks there about like getting aid to Gaza. No, they starved people. They caused a famine. So what is he talking about? And he should be interrupted there by Margaret Brennan, which of course he's not.
Gonna happen.
I think if you look at the dancing in the street in Gaza, if you look at the way that the Gulf Arab states, really the entire Muslim world, but also you look at how the Israelis responded. They were cheering at the mention of President Trump's name yesterday in a massive rally in Israel. This is one of those peace deals where Muslims and Jews and Christians all seem unified, that it's a really good thing for the world. It's a really good thing for humanity. And it happened because of President Trump's leadership. So I actually think.
Okay, well, people in Gaza who have been bombed every single day, or almost every single day, except for a few short lulls, are obviously going to be dancing that the fact they're no longer being bombed.
Right.
That doesn't mean they're like seeing this as a peace deal, and they understand that this doesn't solve any of their problems. And now people face a new phase of the nightmare, which is living in rubble and living under the most brutal military occupation in the world. That remains a problem, which of course he's done nothing to address.
Yeah.
This peace deal will make us safer. I'm sure there are going to be some hard feelings from the last couple of years of war. There always are. But if we could.
Oh, some hard feelings. Yeah. So you think maybe going through a genocide might leave you with some hard feelings. My relatives, like my father who survived the Nazi Holocaust. Yeah. He has hard feelings about the Nazi Holocaust.
Yeah.
I suspect the people of Gaza will have hard feelings too.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, man. The difference is Nazi Holocaust survivors were given the chance to at least rebuild their lives. Like, a lot of people came to North America. They went elsewhere. They went to Palestine, where they were forced to help displace the Palestinian people. Right. What's going to happen for the people of Gaza? Like, where are they going to go?
Yeah.
And what will they be given to help them rebuild?
Are they going to displace a population that had absolutely nothing to do with this? I mean, if history were going to repeat, they would just be moved into a place where other people were living who had nothing to do with this genocide. But that's not going to happen. It really is incredible the way that Israel has been able to, as Ilan Pappé refers to it, Nazify the Palestinians, the Nazification of Palestinians, making it seem like they had anything to do with the Holocaust. It's just so crazy. It goes from Germans trying to kill us to Palestinians, they all want to kill us.
Peace, Margaret, I am 100% sure Americans will be safer because of it.
Let me ask you about what's happening here at home.
Also, really quickly, he refers to the Jews and Christians and Muslims celebrating in the streets. And again, this is this totally dangerous historical revisionism and present day revisionism that presents this conflict, I'm putting conflict in quotes, as a religious conflict, as old as time, time immemorial, as if this is just these people can't get along. And no, that's not what it's about at all. And there were Christians, Muslims, and Jews living in this area in harmony. The problem was when Zionists wanted to create a Jewish majority there. But again, they always like to pretend that it's just this kind of innate, inherent conflict, as opposed to something with major geostrategic and geopolitical sources. All right. Well, if I were to pick who would I like to hear from least on this topic of Gaza and the genocide there, this next guest will be at the top of my list. He's the guy who famously said a week before October 7th that because of his genius stewardship of our national security policy, the Middle East has never been more quiet. He was so proud of himself. And then October 7th happens. And then, of course, he had the opportunity as part of the Biden administration to end the genocide. But at every single turn, he did Israel's bidding to prolong the genocide and prolong the massacres and starvation of the Palestinian people. Before you announce who he is, sorry, I just want to give some credit to people in the comments. We got some people suggesting some people have gotten it now, but some people Blinken, Van Jones, and Lindsey Graham. And you're lucky because you will be able to hear from at least one of those people during the show. But no, it is indeed none other than Jake Sullivan.
President Biden wasn't able to get a deal like this done. President Trump was. Why do you, as someone who was in the room for all of it during President Biden's administration, why do you think that is?
Well, a year ago, things looked a heck of a lot different on the ground than they look today, Dana. A year ago, Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, the author of the worst massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust, he was... Okay, just a reminder, that is such a piece of propaganda. The people who were killed on October 7th were not killed because they were Jewish. It was an attempt to get hostages, captives, exchange, and they were doing it against occupiers. Exactly. The European Jews weren't occupying anybody. Okay. In the Holocaust, during the Holocaust. Yes, right? Yes. The European Jews of Israel, yes, they're occupying the Palestinians. So to compare the Nazi Holocaust to Israel
occupying Palestinians and Palestinians resisting. It's such an insult
Yeah.
to victims of the Nazi Holocaust. It's in fact the exact opposite of the lesson of the Nazi Holocaust, which is to oppose ethno supremacy and oppose oppression, right? And also, if you're going to accuse Hamas of being complicit in the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, then you also have to accuse Israel of the same, because we know that Israel enacted the Hannibal Directive on October 7th and killed at least some of its own people. We don't know exactly how many, because Israel has blocked all independent investigations.
Exactly.
But given that Israeli helicopters fired Hellfire missiles at vehicles and tanks, Israeli tanks fired into homes, you have to imagine the Israeli death toll caused by Israel on October 7th is pretty sizable, which makes Israel complicit in what Jake Sullivan calls the worst massacre of Jews since the Nazi Holocaust.
Yeah. It's really disgusting.
Still alive and operating in Gaza. A year ago, Hezbollah was still attacking Israel. A year ago, Iran was launching ballistic missiles at Israel. We got a ceasefire that ended the Hezbollah attacks.
He's just so disingenuous. Okay, first of all, by the time a year ago, by this time, I think this is when Israel assassinated Hassan Nasrallah. And by then, there had been talk of and there was actually a ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel, which Hezbollah was willing to stick to. Iran, the reason why Iran fired Israel, Jake Sullivan happened to forget, because Israel attacked the Iranian diplomatic facility in Damascus. So Iran retaliated. And of course, Israel did that with U.S. support. So he's leaving that out of the equation. And also, but even whatever, forgetting that context, forgetting like the facts, what does Iran and Hezbollah have to do with whether or not people in Gaza should be slaughtered or not? And the fact is, the only reason Iran and Hezbollah were involved is because Hezbollah got involved after Israel started committing a genocide, because Hezbollah knew that it could, as a part of the acts of resistance, it felt it had a duty to sort of take the pressure off of Gaza and do what it could, which of course failed. And a lot of Lebanon ended up being destroyed because Israel sees the opportunity. So he's just like, yeah, Jake, you could have had the bottom line is this: they could have had the exact same deal well over a year ago. In fact, 2 years ago, he decided to sabotage it. And that's what the difference is. Trump finally decided to call it off. That's what the difference is here.
Yeah.
Defeated the Iranian missile attacks, and Israel took out Sinwar towards the end of last year. And within weeks of that, all of those things happening, there was a ceasefire in place. When President Biden left office, there was not just a ceasefire in place and hostages coming out, but there was actually a roadmap to get to exactly the point we are today.
Yeah, which you were blocking. And the only reason there was a ceasefire is because Trump was coming into office, and Trump didn't want to be distracted by a genocide. He didn't want that spoiling his inauguration. So Trump got Steve Witkoff to basically push through a ceasefire, a pause with Netanyahu. And Netanyahu, of course, listened, which of course Netanyahu would have done if Biden had done the exact same thing way before.
Yeah.
Now, what happened a couple of months into the Trump administration is that Israel walked away from that deal. And then the fighting went on for months and months. So I'm glad we are where we are today. But things have changed quite dramatically since Joe Biden was in office at the beginning of this year.
Yes, things have changed dramatically. And that change is you have a president finally willing to pick up the phone and tell Netanyahu the game is over. Time to knock it off. You've slaughtered enough people. Let's pause the genocide now. That's the difference, Jake Sullivan.
Yes. And also, you know, when they're discussing why that was, that there wasn't this ceasefire under Biden, it reminds me of this quote, a very, very relevant quote from Michael Herzog, who was an ambassador, right? Let's see. Really good. An ambassador. He said, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Herzog, said after Biden's presidency, God did the state of Israel a favor that Biden was the president during the period we fought in Gaza. We fought for over a year, and the administration never came to us and said ceasefire now. So that could have had something to do with it.
Exactly. And CNN, for example, could be reading quotes like that on air to challenge people like Jake Sullivan, but of course they won't. They'll help enable their myth making about, oh no, the circumstances were different. There's nothing we could do. It's just so pathetic. It's just so absolutely pathetic. Imagine if you're Jake Sullivan or Anthony Blinken or Joe Biden, to the extent Joe Biden could still have cogent thoughts. Like, it's not just that you could have prevented the murder of tens of thousands of people. It's that you actively participated in it.
Right.
I mean, even if just the fact you could have prevented it is enough, but it wasn't just you could prevent it. You actively participated in it every single turn. They did nothing to restrain Israel. The one thing they maybe did better than Trump is they maybe a little bit more pressure on Israel to block a little bit less aid, right? Like that's the one difference maybe between Biden and Trump. Yeah. Like Biden allowed Trump allowed for like a full-blown declaration of famine. Biden scaled that back a little bit. I mean, so Biden was in some ways a little bit less sadistic, but ultimately, who has more blood on his hands? It's Biden, because it went on for a lot longer under Biden than it did under Trump.
Right. Absolutely. It's
okay.
So unforgivable.
All right. Well, you wanted it. We'll give it to you. Yeah, Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham is up next.
And by the way, where are we on likes? I mean, have I not trained you? You're under half of you have liked it. We have over 2,000 watching, which is great. Please do tweet this out and share if you haven't already. But come on. Have I taught you nothing? More than you want me to believe that more than half of you are hate watching? I refuse to believe it. By the end of this next clip, we better have the numbers up. All right, let's hear from Lindsey.
Well, Senator, as you lay this out, there are still a lot of complicated steps that need to be taken. President Trump's 20-point plan, as you know, opens the door for Palestinian statehood. But Prime Minister Netanyahu said this. He said, quote,
"No, it doesn't open the door to Palestinian statehood. This is like an open door to nowhere. In the same way that Biden used the open door to NATO to bait Russia and to dangle in front of Ukraine to keep Ukraine acting as bullet stoppers against Russia. The same thing that a Palestinian state opens. No, it offers them nothing. All it says is, as we talked about earlier, it says a Palestinian state and self-determination is the aspiration of the Palestinian people, which is a meaningless statement. It's saying that's your aspiration, not your right. And if you recognize something as an aspiration, not a right, you have no obligation to grant it. And that's exactly what the U.S. plan is, as it always has been under pretty much every single president. The only president who actually has advocated for a Palestinian state was Jimmy Carter, and that was long after he left office.
And he's dead. They killed him. I'm just kidding. He was very old. I was just kidding about that.
I mean, after he left office and long after he left office, then he finally started saying, the Israeli settlements in the West Bank make a Palestinian state impossible. Palestinians have already accepted a compromise including Hamas. And actually, Jimmy Carter met with leaders from Hamas, and he actually monitored their elections, which they democratically won. And he pointed out that even members of Hamas, the leadership, they've accepted a huge compromise of letting Israel steal 88% of their homeland, and Palestinians accepting just 22% of it, the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem. But Israel won't even accept that Palestinian surrender. They insist on stealing all the Palestinian land that they want to and not giving Palestinians even a minimal fragmented state.
Right, yeah.
And that's across the spectrum too. That's Netanyahu to Yitzhak Rabin, who was the architect of the so-called peace process, the Israeli architect of it.
Yeah. And of course, people can check out Peace Not Apartheid by Jimmy Carter.
We are firmly opposed to a Palestinian state, even after signing the plan. So, Senator, let me ask you, does Israel need to accept a two-state solution in order?
Look at Lindsey, for people who are just listening, Lindsey's chuckling as the host there is quoting Netanyahu saying there will be no Palestinian state. He's like, there's Netanyahu at it again. He's so silly. Silly Billy.
Good old BB. Yeah.
Sorry, correction. Not 88%, 78%. Israel would take 78% of Palestinians' stolen homeland.
So no big deal.
Palestinians would take 22%. Yes, my bad. Sorry, it's morning math challenge for me.
In order for any peace to be enduring.
To my friends in Israel, there will not be normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel unless we come up with a plan to allow the Palestinians to have an independent, sovereign country that doesn't threaten Israel.
Notice he says we come up with a plan, right? It doesn't have to be implemented. We just have to come up with a plan for it. And he's kind of talking to his friends in Israel. It's like wink, wink. Like, guys, let's just do a plan, all right? I know it's annoying, but we got to do it. Can you imagine him saying to my friends in Palestine, by the way, or to my Palestinian friends even?
To my Western European friends and allies, there'll never be a Palestinian state after October the 7th as previously envisioned. The borders will have to change to make sure Israel's never attacked again. It won't be a state. It will be more like an emirate. It will probably be a protectorate of Saudi Arabia. But to those who want to annex the West Bank, if you tried to do that in Israel, you'd blow all this up. To those who want to push a state on Israel as if October the 7th never happened, you're going to fail miserably. But I do believe there's a pathway forward to an independent, sovereign Palestine that Israel can accept and live with. But that's going to take a lot of work, and none of that's possible until you get rid of Hezbollah, because Hezbollah will do the same thing in the future to blow this up as Hamas did in the past. So you got to keep Iran in the box.
So that's what the real agenda is here. What he's saying is maybe one day we'll let Palestinians live in something called Palestine, but it won't be a real state. It will have all the major West Bank settlement blocks that keep a Palestinian state impossible, because he talks there about how Israel has those defensible borders when really Israel puts everybody at risk because it insists on installing hundreds of thousands of illegal so-called settlers on Palestinian land. And these are fanatics who come from places like Brooklyn, who go there to steal Palestinians' land and shoot up Palestinians, destroy their olive groves, steal their water. And he's saying all of them can remain, and Palestinians maybe can live in the scattered areas around that. We can call that Palestine. It won't be a real state. And then, of course, the real agenda here is destroying all resistance in the region to Israeli aggression. And that's why he's saying we can't have any peace until Hezbollah and Iran are taken out.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. Also, I love his turn of phrase, push a state on Israel. They're trying to push us. He's saying, you can't push a state on Israel. Palestinians have a legal right to an independent Palestinian state. That's not changed. They're not required to make agreements that compromise on this.
Yes, and the one problem Palestinians face now is that whereas in the past, Arab states were pretty much united in insisting on that. And in fact, they've made offers to Israel going back decades, which I talk about a lot. The Arab states have offered Israel full peace, full normalization, if it simply ends the occupation of the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, and lets Palestinians have a state there. Israel has always rejected that. Netanyahu said that will never, ever be discussed. And again, that's the Palestinian compromise. It's basically a surrender. It's saying, you stole our homeland. Let us have a state in just 22% of it. And Israel, with U.S. backing, has always said no. And the difference now is whereas Arab states previously kind of stuck to that and insisted on that as kind of like the bare minimum. Now they're not even talking about that Palestinian surrender anymore. And in fact, they're expanding their cooperation with Israel. So look at this headline from the Washington Post the other day. This is published this weekend. Arab states expanded cooperation with Israeli military during the Gaza war. So even as these states accused Israel of genocide in Gaza, they were secretly meeting with Israeli officials facilitated by the U.S. to discuss cooperation. And what are they united on? It's basically helping the U.S. confront Iran because they deem Iran to be a threat. When again, even Iran has previously accepted that Arab League peace offer. They've endorsed what's called the two-state solution. Even Iran did, and so did Hamas. And but rather than push for that compromise that they've long offered Israel, now they're actually expanding cooperation with the Israeli military. So what they're saying is they're on board with the U.S. regime change agenda in Iran and in trying to destroy Hezbollah in Lebanon.
It's so disgusting.
We're gonna have to end the show there.
Yeah, because we had so much really important stuff to report on from Palestine, right, and from Gaza, from these negotiations. But Aaron, I think we're going to give the people we're going to cover a lot of the stuff that we missed on this week's Thursday Throwdown, right?
Yes, we will. Which you can get at usefulidiots.podcast.com. Katie, anything you want to quickly plug for the Katie Halper Show?
Oh yeah, so I'm having a great show on this week. I'm gonna have on sorry about this. Okay, I'm gonna have on someone named Janine Ali, who is a Code Pink activist, and she's being accused of choking a Zionist. Janine Ali, she's a 73-year-old woman, and she's being accused choking the director of Betar. So it's a really interesting and important case. And they're also basically trying to equate, of course, the Jewish star with Judaism, saying an attack on a flag, which she didn't even do, but what she's accused of is an anti-Semitic attack. She'll be joining with her lawyer, Janine Yunus, who we've had on this show, a very great anti-censorship, free speech activist, advocate, and lawyer. And also I'll be having on the show Tommy, sorry about this. I forgot.
Okay, we'll tune into your show tomorrow night at what time? 7
p.m. Tommy Marcus,
okay.
who was who was tortured in an Israeli prison.
Okay.
On the flotilla. Yeah. 7 p.m. YouTube.com/the Katie Halper Show.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just doing another show right now, so I have to get off.
Okay.
Thanks for indulging everybody complaining about Mark Maron's podcast. I took up too much time with that. So thanks for indulging me, and thanks for watching Useful Idiots Monday morning. We'll see you next time. Bye everybody.